Hey guys, welcome back to Horology Biology. Today on the bench we have got an Omega Constellation Pie Pan. Now these are highly collectible. This is a 34mm watch with an 18mm look size. It's not running very well. Considering that it's a chronometer, it should be running better than what it actually is. So I'm gonna strip this down, I'm gonna run it through the cleaning machine, and I'm gonna rebuild it. Let's get on with it. Hey guys, so we are gonna strip down this Omega Constellation. First, obviously, as usual, what we need to do is remove the movement from the case. So in a situation like this, I always take off the rotor first. It's a delicate item, and it's easier just to get rid of it before you remove the watch from the case. You gotta remember that it's just on a single screw, and it's balanced. So if you have the watch taken out and then it's resting on it, obviously it could potentially cause some damage. So it's held in with one tiny little screw and a little plate which secures it in place. And removing that, and you can just simply take it out of the watch. Once that's out, I then remove the winding stem with my favorite way. It's not a screw. I must admit, I much prefer the ones where you just push them in rather than unscrew it, because it's just so much less hassle, especially when you're trying to put a setting lever in and you're having to turn the watch upside down to hold the screwdriver in place so that you can screw it in. The push-in lever ones are so much nicer. So like I said, this Omega Constellation chronometer has not been running particularly good. It starts and stops. I've removed the watch from the case, and now I'm just going to remove the hands. Using a Presto tool for this. There's only 3 hands, so I don't find it any stress on the watch. Beautiful little hands as well. I like the way that the watch has got no loom whatsoever, which makes it very nice. The dial's not in the best condition though, I must admit. You probably can see it in the images. There's a little bit of wear to the enamel, especially between the 12 and 2 o'clock area, which is a little frustrating because I really like the dial with it being a non-date version. Not as common as the date versions on the Pie Pans. So to have it without a date, I think is a much added bonus. So the dial was held in with 2 dial screws on the side of the movement. They've been removed and put to one side, and then the dial has been removed from the watch. Just removing the hour wheel and inspecting what's underneath, and it looks pretty good. Not seeing any obvious signs of damage, so that's a good sign. Cannon pinion has been removed with a Presto tool, and now the watch has been flipped back over. So in all cases, I always say it's always best to remove the balance from the watch. It's such a delicate item with the hairspring. You don't want to accidentally bang it up while you're removing other parts, so it's just easy just to remove the balance wheel completely, put it aside, keep it safe, and then you can just get on with the strip down of the watch without worrying about it in any other shape or form. So just removing the automatic works from the top of the movement. That's held in place with 2 screws. And this is what's driving power from the rotor all the way down to the mainspring barrel. So when you're walking around and you feel the watch shake, this is what's adding that extra charge, so it saves you from winding the watch up every day. Such a cool invention, the automatic watches. So now that's removed, I just have let power down to the mainspring. That's really important before you proceed. Always good to make sure that there's no charge left in the watch, because you don't want things flying around all over the place. So just removing the Pallet's bridge and the pallet forks. Now I can move on to the motion work, so removing the crown wheel and the core of the crown, and also the ratchet wheel and the click spring. They all sit on top of that big barrel bridge, which covers around 50% of the watch, as you can see. Now it's interesting as well because I noticed on this that underneath the ratchet wheel there's, I'm not sure the name of it, if I'm honest. There you see it, it's like a second ratchet wheel, so to speak. It has very interesting teeth to it. So just removing that washer that was underneath the crown wheel. Take that out with a piece of Rodico because it's so thin, my tweezers won't grab it. So now just unscrewing the screws that are holding the barrel bridge in place. 3 screws. And there's the click spring. I must admit, I really do like working on vintage Omega watches. I mean, I love Enickers, of course, don't get me wrong. But I'll be honest, the quality of the craftsmanship that you see in these vintage Omegas, they're so nice to work on. They really are. Everything just fits into place, so snug. Even the color of the movements themselves are just so nice to look at. So off comes the train of wheel bridge, and underneath you have all the wheels in place. So we remove the 4th wheel, 3rd wheel, we remove the escape wheel, and then we have the center wheel there as well. Now slightly different on this watch is it has a little tension spring that sits on top of a seconds pinion. So that's what's actually connecting to your seconds hand. And it's a really delicate piece there that's just been put down. It's literally just a thin little pipe with a tiny little gear on the top of it, and that goes all the way through the center wheel. I personally don't like these designs, if I'm honest. I much prefer it when it's fixed, and the reason I'm saying that is when you're putting the hands on, you do really feel the difference, because, how do I say it, when you're pushing the seconds hand back on, you can kind of feel if you press in a little too hard that it will push on the other side, so you really have to make sure that you support that. Because it can be challenging. So off comes the center wheel, and now we're left with the barrel bridge with the mainspring inside. Just removing some parts from the keyless works there, the winding pinion and the sliding pinion. And now the watch has been turned over, we can remove the rest of the keyless works. So just removing the setting lever. It has a little plate on top because it's a push version rather than a screw. So it has like a little lever on top of it, which creates like a spring motion, so that obviously when you push it to release the winding stem, it goes back into place and obviously locks that winding stem in place, so it's not pulling out every time you set the time on the watch. So a little intermediate wheel there stuck. We put those pieces to one side, and then we can remove the minute wheel. Again, the quality of it, I mean, they really knew how to make watches back in these days. They really, really did. So next we've got the yoke and the yoke spring. Just removing those. So now that the watch is being stripped down, we put the balance back onto the movement. As I've mentioned before, it's the easiest and safest way to clean this when it goes into the cleaning machine, because it's just putting it back in its place, keeping it secure, and it's just really the best thing to do. So now I just popped open the barrel, which has got the mainspring inside. I will remove the arbor and also remove the mainspring. Best way to do it is just to feed it through your thumbs. Release a little bit of the tension with a pair of tweezers or a screwdriver, and then you can carefully lift it out and then feed it out with your thumbs. And you have to do it carefully, because otherwise it will just fly across the room, or it might hit you in the face, and yeah, you don't want that. So the only thing left now is just to dismantle what's left of the automatic works. I usually leave this to the end. So this little bridge is held in with 3 screws, and underneath you've got a reversing wheel, a couple of small intermediate wheels, and all of these gears and wheels, they help drive the automatic works to add power to the watch from the rotor. And it's important to break the automatic works down, because there's so much going on inside. Obviously you can get buildup of old oil and grease, and you need to make sure that this is cleaned correctly. And the reason being is it's used, I mean, when you're wearing this watch every day, you've got to remember that these gears are constantly moving, they're constantly rubbing up against each other as they're adding charge to the watch. So here we have all the parts ready for the cleaning machine. I have them all laid out here so you can see them. So just doing some pre-cleaning. I'm using a glass fiber brush just to clean off any excess dirt. Also very important, I am what they call pegging the jewels, where you use some pegwood and you just rub the dirty oil and the dirty dried up grease from the jewel holes, because the cleaning machine, it's good, but you need to give it a helping hand. Hey guys, welcome back to the rebuild of this juicy chronometer Omega Pie Pan watch. So we have stripped down this watch, we have pre-cleaned the watch, we have deep cleaned the watch, all the parts have been laid out, and we are ready to go rebuilding it. First thing I'm doing in regards to this is throwing away that dirty old mainspring, and I have got a new one, which actually caused me a nightmare. If I'm honest with you, the mainspring was actually not too bad, but I broke it. And I really wanted to finish this video, so I ended up jumping in the car, flying all the way down to the sparewatches.nl website, which are super awesome. These guys saved my life. They had a mainspring in stock, so it's 20 minutes from my place. I went all the way down in the car, got a new mainspring, came all the way back, and then I could fit it into the watch. So I was really happy that they could help me out at such short notice. I will leave a link in the description to these guys, because when it comes to parts, they're really good, and they've helped me out a few times in the past, especially with Enica mainsprings and things like that. So new mainsprings being put into the barrel. I added in some chrono grease first, because it's an automatic watch, so you need to apply some braking grease to the sides of the barrel wall only. And then I've popped it in, and I'm just about to put on the lid of the barrel, and that's just press fit in place with this little tool. These tools are really cool. You can buy them from Bourgeon and they will cost you around 50 euros, or you can buy virtually exactly the same thing for around 3 euros on eBay, and that's exactly what I did. As much as I do like quality in regards to the tools that I use, you also have to be a little bit realistic. It's a little plastic thing. It really is as simple as that. And if I'm honest, I cannot see a difference between spending 50 euros and justifying that on a Bergeon one when a generic one is exactly the same. So yeah, when it comes to screwdrivers, tweezers, tools like that, of course you want quality, but things that's just involving like a little plastic tray, no, I will go generic every time, because I think it's just an absolute waste of money just to fork out, because you're paying for the name basically. So now that that's in, I have removed the capsules from the balance, and I'm just clean them off with my finger to rub off any excess oil, adding them to a fixer drop treatment. And the reason I do that is so that when I add a little bit of oil, which will be 90-10 to the capstone, the fixer drop helps that the oil doesn't disperse everywhere. It keeps it all in the same spot, like a little raindrop. And you want it to be like that because it's such a tiny area that you're working on. So that when you apply the capstone back on, you want to keep this little bead of oil in the same place. You don't want it to run around anywhere. So this really helps it do that. So just add in a little 90-10, and then I can put the capstone back on and I can put it back into the balance. So we just closed the shock system, the Inca block on top. That's just held in with two little levers that you can just nip into each side with your tweezers. Just click those in place and it'll set the stone correctly. So it's interesting with this being an Omega Constellation chronometer. You know, define chronometer, what exactly is that? Some people, they're not too sure what that is and what's the difference. So in a nutshell, it is a watch movement that has been through rigorous testings, more than normal testings, in order to be certified as a chronometer. So with Omega, the way it works is it's tested in 5 different positions. It is also tested at 3 different temperatures. I believe it's like 8 degrees, 23 degrees, and 38 degrees Celsius. And they test this over around a 2-week period. And after that, they want to make sure that the accuracy of the watch doesn't fall anywhere between -4 seconds and +6 seconds per day. And as long as it maintains within this criteria, it then gets a certification as being marked as a chronometer watch, which is quite impressive when you think about it, because it is quite a lot of tests, and also doing it over a 2-week period. I think it's 2 weeks, either 14, 15 days they have to do it. So I'm just doing the capstone from the bottom, from the dial side of the watch, sorry. Same principle as the one that lives on top of the balance. It's exactly the same. Just fixer drop treatment, cleaning it, then the fixer drop treatment, and then just a little bit of 90-10. And then that just gets replaced back into the watch. The system on this side, it's a little bit different. It's not the typical Inca block setting. It is a different type. It just looks a little bit different, and it's actually held in with a screw. So just screwing that back in place, and then once that's done, I can remove the balance from the watch and then get on with the rebuild. I like to do it this way because the balance is already on the watch when it's come out of the cleaning machine. So I leave those capsules in place and then I just clean them manually, remove the balance, and then I can get on to build up the watch. So another thing that was quite interesting was yesterday I did receive a package in the post. I am happy to say that I have got a lot more Enica car stickers back in stock. These are stickers that are not something that I sell. They will be something that periodically over time I will start to give away on my YouTube channel. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do that yet, but that was the sole purpose for why I got them. So I have a batch of around 20 that I've just turned up. They're super nice. They look great on your car. They're not too big, so they're quite subtle. And like I said, I haven't exactly decided how I'm going to give them away yet, but it'll be something that I will do over the next course of the few months. So keep tuned in regards to how and when I'm going to do that. So I just added in the center wheel to the watch and also the barrel. I added a little bit of Mobius 1300 before I added those, and now I'm just adding a little 1300 to the side of the arbor, making sure that that's lubricated correctly. So on goes the barrel bridge. Also just checking that there's not any unnecessary play between the arbor and the barrel bridge. If there was, then that would need to be adjusted. It can happen with an age of a watch where you start to get too much play, and that can certainly affect the performance of the watch, so then you would need to adjust the size of that hole. It seems fine on this one, so there's no need to do any modifications with that. Also, I'm not an Omega specialist at all in regards to being connected to them, so I'm not doing any chronometer testing or anything on this watch. This is just being rebuilt to the best of my knowledge and just oiled to the best of my knowledge. So adding a little 1300 here to the post where the crown wheel will go and the crown core. And also again a little 1300 for the click. Like I was saying before, I really love working on these vintage Omega watches. I have a few others that need servicing, so maybe I will do another video. These videos do take quite a long time, but they're definitely a lot of fun to work on. But if you are liking the content that I'm providing here, I'd really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to my channel. It will help my channel grow. I'm already completely shocked how much it's grown literally in 4 weeks. That is all how long I've been running the channel for as we stand, about 4 or 5 weeks, and I'm really happy with how it's growing. I'm really surprised, and at the same time, yeah, I think it's great, especially for vintage Enica, that we can definitely show more Enica watches to the masses and get more people involved. I've had a few people message me saying, hey, I'm a big Enica fan, I didn't know that your channel existed, etc, etc, so that's really nice to hear. I really appreciate those comments. So just adding on the ratchet wheels. I'm saying wheels because I'll be honest, I'm not sure what the correct name is for this one. It actually does have a square hole, so maybe this is the ratchet wheel and then the one that goes on top is like an additional ratchet wheel, or is this a ratchet wheel core? Maybe somebody can help me in the comments regarding that, because I'm not too sure, if I'm honest. But I believe that it will be to do with the automatic works, why it has two. I know on the Enica watches it is a similar setup, but the additional wheel is underneath the barrel. So just screwing those in place. Now usually on the crown wheel on watches you find that it's a reverse threaded screw. On this one it's not, it's screwed on in the normal fashion. I believe it's purely because the screw hole is not centered. As you can see, it's more to the side rather than the center of where the wheel goes. So I believe that that's why it's not a reverse threaded screw. So I just put on the washer for that. Before I add on the crown wheel, I add a little 1300 just on the inside of it, because you've got to remember that the core is going to go in the middle of that, and that needs to be lubricated because it's going to turn against it. I also add a little bit of grease to the underneath of the crown wheel as well, because that is literally sitting flush on top of that washer on the plate. So again, that's going to cause friction when you're winding it. And the reason we add these greases and these oils is to stop unnecessary wear. I mean, this is a watch that is like 60 odd years old, and I obviously don't know the service history of it, but when I look at the condition of these wheels, they're in good condition. So somebody has obviously looked after it before, so I definitely feel that it's my responsibility, being the next one in line, so to speak, to make sure that I've lubricated it to the best of my knowledge, so that however many years in the future, the next person that services the watch can also appreciate it and think, oh, I'm glad that last guy serviced that, or that last girl serviced that and oiled it correctly. But it's so important to have watches serviced. I mean, it's certainly not something that you need to do every year, but a lot of people don't take this seriously, and it's like a car. I mean, literally, no word of a lie, I dropped my car off this morning to have it serviced at VW, and yeah, I already saw how much that's going to cost me, and I'm really not happy about that. But at the end of the day, it's a mechanical object, just like a watch. And it's important that you service these objects, because if you do it, it prolongs the life of the vehicle, just like it prolongs the life of the watch, and it means that it's going to be more reliable and it's not going to let you down. So as much as I don't like the 550 euros that VW are charging me for this service, damn, it is important to have it done. So I'm just putting in that seconds pinion, I believe that's what it's called, and it has this little fiddly plate, like a tension spring that sits on top of it, which is held in with one microscopic screw, and it just stops it from moving out the other side. But like I said, it's not like it's a piece of steel or anything like that. It literally just looks like a very thin piece of tin or brass. It's very thin, so it obviously is not going to stop it from being pushed out the other side if you applied like a massive amount of force. So it's important that you do take care when you punch in the seconds hand back on. So now that all these things are in place so far, we can start building up the train of wheels, first with the escape wheel, and then we move through the rest of the line all the way up to the center wheel. So that's the wheels all in place, and now we put on the train wheels bridge. It's not a massive bridge, but it is obviously got, I believe it's 3 jewel holes that you need to line up with the pivots. And it's really important that you line these up correctly, because if you don't and you screw it down, you will break them, because they are very delicate. So you need to really take your time on this. Again, like I've mentioned before, the quality of vintage Omega is really good, and things just seem to click into place. It sounds ridiculous, but things really do. I mean, you get some bridges which are a complete pain in the ass. It happens, but I do find with vintage Omega calibers, this being a 551, yeah, things just work really nice. And I didn't have much difficulty at all with this. Things fell into place nicely. I could screw it down, and it was very simple. So just testing it, and as you can see, everything's moving freely, which is really nice. So I'm just doing that by putting the screwdriver on top of the ratchet wheel and just giving it a few little turns lightly. There's nothing blocking it because the pallet forks are not in yet, so it'll just turn freely and freely because there's no tension being added to the mainspring. So now I can oil the jewels. First I do this side of the movement. I add 9010, and to the last wheel I added 1300. Flipping the movement over, I now oil the other side on the dial side. Same principle with the oils, combination of 9010 and 1300. And I add a little bit of 1300 as well to the center wheel. Adding a little bit of grease as well onto the side of the cannon pinion. Just doing that now, for where it will go. And the cannon pinion is friction fit. So you just place it on top and then you just push it down with your tweezers and you'll hear it click in place. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. But cannon pinions can be tricky, you know. You don't want them too tight, and you certainly don't want them too loose. It's like a really fine balance, because if it's too loose, your hands on the watch are not going to turn. The watch will still run, but the hands are not going to move, and of course the watch is going to be completely useless then. So it's a very fine line in it being tight, but not too tight. So now I'm just adding some grease to the winding pinion and the sliding pinion, because as the watch is on the dial side now, I can move on to the keyless works and just pop that in place. But like I said, it's such a shame about the dial on this watch. I mean, it's not super bad, but yeah, the dial's not perfect. I mean, it's just worn enamel, but I mean, something has obviously happened at some stage. Maybe the crystal was cracked, I mean, years ago. Certainly not as it is now, but maybe it was cracked years ago and some moisture got in, and the lacquer on top of the dial has peeled away a little bit in that top right hand corner area between 12 and 2. So it's a little irritating, but it's not that bad, and it's certainly not anything that I would rectify. So just adding this little tension spring in place, held in with one screw. So like I said, this helps create some leverage when you're pushing on the setting lever to release the winding stem. Such a cool design, and I much prefer these than setting lever screws, because they can be a pain. If you unscrew that a little bit too much, you're going to mess up the whole keyless works, and then you're going to have to remove the dial, the hands and the dial in order to rectify it. So I'm a big fan of these push systems. So now just add in some 1300 to where the intermediate wheel will go and the minute wheel, and also where the yoke will go. A little bit of grease will be added as well for where the yoke will sit on top of the winding pinion. So now that's done, we can add these parts in place. So just add in the yoke spring. Important to try and use a piece of pegwood while you're securing this in place, because yeah, there's a lot of tension. It's held under a lot of tension, so you want to secure that in place. I always continue to hold it in place because then I use a little bit of oil between the spring and the yoke, and while I'm holding it in place, it's just easy for me to slide my oil between. So now the minute wheel goes on, and the intermediate wheel. So when it comes to vintage Omega, I mean, I've been a fan of these for many years now, and I've collected quite a few. I like the chronograph models as well. Like, I own a Speedmaster Mark II. Big fan of that one. It's such an awesome watch. Curious what you guys like when it comes to vintage Omega as well. Maybe you can address that in the comment section. Let me know which one that you've got. So that's the keyless works in place, and just testing the functionality of that now, making sure that it's all engaged so that I can move between. Cleaning off any excess grease with some Rodico, because obviously you don't want to leave too much on there and make it all dirty. So I always clean it off afterwards, make sure it's nice and clean. And then just a few tests and winds with the crown, make sure that everything's engaging correctly, and it looks good. Happy with that. Flip the watch back over. And we're definitely well on our way in regards to this. So now it's a case of treating the pallet forks to some fixer drop, because the exit fork will need to be lubricated so that it adds a little bit of special oil to the escape wheel teeth. Now I do that off camera because it's really such a small area to work on, and I can't work out how to film that properly yet. Maybe in the future I will sort that out with my microscope, because I do have an option with my microscope where I can connect it to my Mac. So maybe I could take some screen video shots of me doing that and add that in. So now that that's had fixer drop treatment, I just clean off the pivots and then I pop it into the movement. And once I've got it in place and got it aligned in the jewel, I can add the pallet fork bridge on top, which is secured in with 2 screws. I mean, look at the color of this movement, seriously. It's like a golden brown, brassy looking, sexy beast. Damn, it's good. I mean, even though I love Enica watches, as you guys already can tell, I much prefer the color of the movements on the vintage Omega. I mean, I like the vintage Enica, but this is more of a, I find it more of a richer dark brown golden color. So that's the oil that I will use, or the grease I should say, that I will use to grease the pallet fork. And 9415, it's only used for the pallet fork treatment. It's important to say as well that you don't need to oil the pallet fork jewel. Never add any oil to that, doesn't need any. But for the exit fork, that is something that you do want to lubricate. And I do that in 3 times, so I apply a little bit, then I move it backwards and forwards, the pallets 5 times, so it hits 5 of the teeth on the escape wheel, and then I do it another 2 times so that I'm basically done all the 15 teeth. Now that that's done and it's all in place, I can add the balance back to the watch so that we can get some life into it. And as we've seen before, it's just held in with 1 screw. Just want to make sure that it's aligned correctly. Give it a little nudge and it should fire up. There we go. Just let's get it seated correctly and then we can just screw it in place. Add a few winds to it. That seems to be running quite nice. So the only thing that we really need to do now, as we've got this far, is rebuild the automatic works. So the first part that I'm just adding in the little plate where the rotor sits on. That's held in with 3 screws. Now I've done that, I can add in the rest of the wheels. And they are so small, these last 2. They can cause you a little bit of a headache. Make sure that they're seated correctly in their jewel holes. And then once they are, there's a bridge plate that you put on the back. Pop that on, oil it. I use 90-10. See, I didn't lie, they are a little bit tricky. So that's been put on, screwed in place. Just give it a little nudge of the wheel to make sure everything's seated. Oil the back. And now I can fit it to the watch. And as we saw earlier on, it's just held in place with 2 screws. Now what I do is when I put it on, I don't just press it on, I lightly put it on and then I turn the crown so that it engages. It's better to do that so that you don't cause any stress or anything to break. So now I'm happy with that. I can just secure it with 2 screws. And we're so close now. So close to the end. But guys, if you've got this far, please hit a like on this video. I would very much appreciate it. You can also subscribe to my channel. Also, I'm available on Instagram as Horology_Biology. So you can check me on there in between videos. So I'm just oiling the top of this automatic works. adding some 9010, and then I'm adding just a little bit of grease to the center screw where the rotor will go, and just cleaning off any extra grease. So the hour wheel has gone on now. Just making sure it's engaging correctly. And that's it, we are nearly there. Taking the dial out of its dial case. So I keep it aside in a little box, and I've got the hands underneath there as well. You see, yeah, when I look at it like this, it's not that bad. I mean, I'm complaining about this dial, but yeah, there's a little bit of wear, but this watch is like over 60 years old. I'm like, man, I need to stop being harsh on this watch. So as mentioned before, the dial, it will be held in place by 2 dial screws. You can find those located on the side of the movement, and they're pretty small, and you just screw them in place. You don't have to go nuts on them, just lightly. So now that's all locked in place and the dial's fitted on correctly, just giving it a little bit of a clean with some Rodico, just to make sure any extra dust or any dirt that's built up can just be removed. And it has got actually a nice patina on this dial as well. I love the little star at the bottom. I think it really makes these Pie Pans so beautiful. And last but not least, we get to fit the hands. Now, one of my cameras did stop, so I only have 2 operating at the minute now for this. I'm using my Horotech hand punch tool. It's got 3 punches on it, which is really nice, so I don't have to change the dies all the time. So first we put on the hour wheel. Because there's no date, we can put it on anywhere we want. We don't need to set it to 12. Once it's on, then we set it to 12. And then we can add the minute hand. And last but not least, we can add the seconds hand. Like I said, because of that seconds pinion, don't go nuts when you're pushing this down. Just a light tap is enough. You don't need to go crazy on this. But I really like this tool. I mean, it's so much more accurate than using a hand tool for this. Also, it's important to make sure that the hands are not touching. So you want to make sure that they're all running freely, because if the hands are touching each other, then they will end up stopping the watch. So just cleaning the dial with a blower, just making sure any dust is off of there before we case this watch up. So now that the watch is in the case, it's interesting, you'll see I've popped a couple of images up. What I didn't notice was, when I was working on this watch, was after I got the balance on, it was running a little bit strange. And then I noticed that one of the arms of the Inca block system had snapped off. Now, I don't know if this had snapped off while I was stripping the watch down, or if it was like it before. I hadn't noticed. Now, luckily, I have a box full of these. So there we have it, guys, the Omega Constellation chronometer Pie Pan with the caliber 551. Cased up, running nice. Beautiful strap on it, and I'm very happy with how it's worked out. And I should definitely stop complaining about that dial. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit a like on this for me. Also subscribe to my channel. It will motivate me more to do more of these videos, especially more Enica videos and more vintage Omega. Okay guys, until next time.